Today, we're going to look at some of the most feared oceanic predators in the world. The sharks in the family Lamnidae, more commonly known as the white sharks. As usual, a document for the sources for the images used, along with research papers I found useful, will be included in the description of this video. Sharks are in the class Chondrichthyes, or the cartilaginous fish. Defining something as a fish is not particularly useful, as it is impossible to have a phylogenetic group containing only all fish without including all other vertebrates as well. But to give a very brief overview of that part of the tree of life, the most primitive vertebrates that are still around today are the jawless fish. There are two classes of these, with the hagfish and myxini and the lampreys and hyperortia. Chondrichthyes is the next stage of this tree, as the fish in it have skeletons made mostly of cartilage instead of bone. This means they use a lot less energy when swimming, but it also means that the skeleton lacks a solid structure, and so they would be crushed under their own weight on land. This is sharply contrasted with the last group of fish, which contains the bony fish and osteichthyes. It is osteichthyes that later diversified into the other groups of vertebrates we are familiar with. Most of the world's fish are in the class Actinopterygi, or the ray-finned fish. The other group are the lobe-finned fish and Sarcopterygi. In terms of fish, this group contains the coelacanths and the lungfish. The rest of the living members of this group are actually the terrestrial vertebrates, amphibians, mammals, reptiles, and birds. So, returning to Chondrichthyes, the class has two subclasses. The sharks, rays, skates, and sawfish are in Elasmobranchi, while the deep-sea chimeras or ghost sharks are in Holocephali. We will, of course, be focusing on the sharks in the subclass Elasmobranchi today. Sharks have some very interesting features found amongst all of them. They have extremely unique teeth. These are affixed to their gums instead of being fused to their jaw. They have multiple rows of teeth, and these are constantly moved forward so that their teeth are constantly being replaced. Some sharks will lose and replace over 30,000 teeth throughout their lifetime. The teeth of sharks can be different between different species of shark to be specialized for their preferred prey. These vary from flat teeth in the shellfish-eating nurse sharks, to the needle-like teeth of small angel sharks, to the serrated teeth of sharks that chase larger prey, like the tiger sharks. There are even a couple of filter-feeding species that have tiny teeth for their size. Unlike most fish, sharks are covered in a special type of scale known as denticles. These denticles allow the shark to move quietly, swiftly, and almost effortlessly through the water. They make the skin of sharks very rough to the touch, being described as feeling similar to sandpaper. Sharks have a sensory organ known as the ampullae of Lorenzini. This is a series of electroreceptors that allow them to detect weak electrical signals, and so locate prey when it is too dark for eyesight. This is how many sharks can hunt in deep waters or at night. Sharks also have an extremely strong sense of smell, which is estimated to be 10,000 times stronger than a human's. They can smell a small drop of blood in the water from 400 meters or quarter of a mile away. They can detect heavily diluted blood, even when it is only 1 part in 1 million. This smell is not just restricted to blood, they can also smell other bodily fluids like sweat and urine, and use this to track prey over large distances. It is time to start moving away from the evolution and phylogeny and zooming into the Lamniformes, which is the order of sharks commonly known as the mackerel sharks. The mackerel sharks contain some of the most well-known and also some of the most unusual of all sharks. The order has 10 families with 22 living species between them. It starts with the extremely unusual goblin shark. This is a deep-sea shark that is the only remaining species of a lineage that is estimated to be 125 million years old. After that, the rest of the family is divided into 2 clades. In the first one, we have the thresher sharks in the family Alopidae. These are highly distinctive sharks due to their extremely long tail fin, which can be longer than the entire body. Next is the sand sharks in Odontospididae. They are so called due to their preference for remaining in sandy, shallow waters. The next family only has one species, the crocodile shark. This is a tropical species that stays deeper in the water during the day, but goes to the surface at night to feed. The final family in this clade also only has one single living species, the megamouth shark. This is another highly unusual shark, being a deep water species and the smallest of the 3 living filter-feeding sharks. Moving on to the other clade, there is a little bit of taxonomic confusion, as we have the grey nurse shark, which used to be included with the sand sharks. Next is the basking shark, the second of the filter-feeding species, and the last one included with the Lamniformes. The basking shark is the second largest fish and the second largest shark, only losing out the top spot to the third filter-feeding shark, the whale shark. After that, we finally have the actual subject of today's video, the white sharks in the family Lamnidae. There are 5 living species of white shark over 3 genera, the most famous of which is definitely the great white shark. There are many known extinct species and genera in this family too, but this video will be long enough without getting into those. The family name, Lamindae, is named after the Lamia, an ancient Greek child-eating monster. While white sharks are definitely apex predators, this is not entirely fair, as they do not go out of their way to attack humans. While the great white shark is the cause of most shark attacks against humans, many of their attacks are not fatal. They seem to use biting as a way to tell what something is and to test whether it is edible. They will often bite buoys and other floating objects for this reason, and so it appears that humans are another unknown object to them, resulting in many of the shark attacks. White sharks are known for being powerfully built predators, and are often as much as twice as heavy as similarly sized sharks from other families. Many of them are some of the fastest fish in the world, but it is worth noting that the large size of the great white makes it slower than the other species in this family. They have highly streamlined bodies with a pointed nose, large dorsal fin, and a mouth that is large enough to extend behind the eye. The phylogeny of living white sharks begins with those in the genus Lamna. We will start with the salmon shark, Lamna ditropis. It is only found in the northern Pacific Ocean from the United States to the Sea of Japan. On the USA side of the ocean, they are known to be common in the highly productive waters around Alaska, but can go as far south as California. They are recognizable by their dark grey back, while their white belly has darker blotches. They can grow to 2 to 2.6 meters, or 6.6 to 8.6 feet, and look fairly similar to the great white sharks, although salmon sharks are much smaller. Its common name comes from its favourite prey, salmon, and these sharks have been known to congregate in large numbers in favourable places for the salmon run, such as Prince William Sound in the Gulf of Alaska. Their diet is not restricted to only salmon, however, and they are known to eat other fish and squid. Salmon sharks are unusual for sharks, and fish in general, as they are homeothermic. Homeothermy is the ability to maintain a constant body temperature, regardless of external temperatures. For most fish, this fluctuates as the temperature of the water around them changes. All of the sharks in Lamnidae are homeothermic, but this phenomenon has been best studied in the salmon sharks. These sharks have unusual structures called the retia mirabilia, which is Latin for wonderful nets. Retia mirabilia is a series of arteries and veins lying near each other, appearing to form a complex net, hence the name. These blood vessels are close enough to each other that they can exchange heat, allowing for the overall body temperature of the shark to remain constant and minimize the body heat lost to the colder water. Salmon sharks use this to cope with colder waters, such as those around Alaska, and it also contributes to the speed seen in most white sharks. The salmon shark is listed as least concern by the IUCN. It is not routinely hunted by any commercial fishery. Fishermen regard it as a nuisance species, as salmon sharks can damage fishing gear and feed on commercially valuable species like salmon. For these reasons, they are killed when caught as bycatch. There is some debate about whether salmon sharks should be considered dangerous to humans. They are large enough to pose a threat, and given their close relation to great whites and mako sharks, it might be assumed that they could be just as dangerous. However, there have been no confirmed attacks on humans by salmon sharks, and there are cases where divers swam near them and sharks showed no aggressive or threatening behaviours. The closest relative of the salmon shark, and the only other species in the same genus, is the Porbeagle, Lamna nasus. The origins of this unusual name are not clear, although there are several suggestions. Firstly, the beagle part of their name likely originates from the 16th century and earlier, when sailors referred to sharks as sea dogs. One suggestion for the name is that it is a combination of porpoise and beagle, referring to the shark's body shape and tenacity respectively. Porbeagles are recognisable due to their large rostrum or snout, which is also where their scientific name comes from, with nasus meaning nose. They also have a very distinctive tail, which forms a crescent shape. This is an adaptation that helps them efficiently maintain fast speeds, and is a feature that has independently evolved in distantly related fish like tuna and marlin. As a result, along with the salmon sharks, porbeagles are some of the fastest of the sharks, helped by both their tail and their stockier body ratio. They vibrate their tail while holding their body rigid. This gives them excellent propulsion with relatively little energy cost, but it does decrease their maneuverability. Its distribution is similar to the salmon shark, in that they are found in similar temperate waters, but notably, their ranges do not overlap. The porbeagle is found in the North Atlantic and also in the Southern Ocean. It is confirmed around the landmasses like South America, Africa, and New Zealand, but it is assumed that it inhabits the oceans between these landmasses, so that its southern populations are not completely isolated. The disjointed distribution, with the northern hemisphere population being notably isolated from the southern one, is believed to have occurred during the Quaternary glaciation about 2.6 million years ago. This is because the tropical zone was much smaller than it is today, so the sharks were able to colonize the southern hemisphere. When temperatures started to warm up again, the two populations were cut off from each other, leading to the distribution seen today. Porbeagles show diel migration, that is, that they move to different parts of the water column depending on the time of day. During the day, they stay in deeper waters and move towards the surface at night. They also exhibit seasonal migration. Around North America, for example, they tend to spend spring in the deeper waters of the Nova Scotia continental shelf. They then migrate 1,000 kilometers to be in the shallower waters around the Gulf of St. Lawrence for summer and autumn. Porbeagles are generalist predators, eating a wide variety of prey. Their diet is largely comprised of bony fish and cephalopods like squid, but they have been known to eat smaller sharks and mollusks, crustaceans, and other invertebrates on occasion. Quite a lot is known about the breeding habits of porbeagles. They are unusual in that their breeding season is around the same time in both hemispheres, suggesting that it is not tied to the seasons or temperature. Mating takes place between September and November. 2 mating grounds are known in the northern hemisphere, and it can be assumed that there are also breeding grounds in the southern hemisphere, although given how remote much of the Southern Ocean is, it is hard to know for sure. To mate, males will bite onto a female's gills and hold on while copulating, meaning mated females will often bear mating scars. They usually have 4 pups at a time, but this can vary anywhere from 1 to 5. All of the species in this family, including porbeagles, give birth to live young, but they have an interesting strategy of feeding their unborn young. Unlike mammals, sharks don't have a placenta-like organ to deliver nutrients from the mother to the young. The embryos are initially nourished by the yolk sac in their egg, but once they are large enough, this starts to run out. To compensate, the mother lays a lot of unfertilized eggs for the young to feed on in the uterus. While the young initially have no way to break into these eggs, once they are large enough, the embryos grow 2 long teeth for this purpose. Porbeagles are one of the few fish species that have shown behaviors that could be interpreted as playing. They have been seen in kelp forests rolling around and wrapping themselves up in the kelp near the surface. Porbeagles in groups have been seen to playfully chase each other, and will also play with items floating in the water like driftwood or buoys. Some of these behaviors do have other possible explanations, but at the very least, porbeagles are inquisitive. There are very few confirmed reports of porbeagles attacking humans. As of 2024, the International Shark Attack File only lists 2 unprovoked attacks by them, and both were non-fatal. There are other reports of them mock-attacking divers, but these did not appear to be true attacks, and were probably defensive behaviors to try and drive off a potential threat. Porbeagles are listed as vulnerable by the IUCN, although certain populations are more threatened, like the eastern North Atlantic one being critically endangered. Unlike the salmon shark, porbeagles are highly prized by fisheries. Their meat is actually considered to be the most valuable meat of any shark species, and their fins are also sought after. However, porbeagles cannot reproduce quickly enough to sustain such intensive fishing. They have small litters with only 4 pups a year, and these take a long time to reach sexual maturity. This, in combination with fisheries targeting all age groups, makes sharks in general, and porbeagles in particular, highly susceptible to overfishing. Norway and Denmark began intensively fishing for porbeagles in the northeast Atlantic in the 1930s. This peaked in 1947, but then porbeagle numbers drastically declined in the following decades. In the 1960s, the Norwegian vessels tried going further west in an effort to find new Porbeagle populations, but these efforts proved short-lived, as these new populations only took around 7 years of commercial fishing to collapse. Other European nations like France and Spain also had their own attempts at harvesting porbeagles, but with similar results. They find large numbers initially, but these plummet once fishing begins. In 2011, the European Union enacted a complete ban on fishing for porbeagles within its waters, putting a definitive end to porbeagle fishing in the northeast Atlantic. I don't want to sound like this is just a European problem either, but they are the best documented. Canada has depleted its stocks of porbeagles to around 11% of their initial population by the year 2000. Porbeagles in the southern hemisphere were mostly caught as bycatch by tuna fisheries, but this has still had a large impact on their populations, with vessels operated by Uruguay and New Zealand catching large numbers of them. Unfortunately, despite these documented population crashes in porbeagles, efforts to protect the species have progressed very slowly. I already mentioned that the EU did not start protecting them until 2011. Part of the reason for this is that CITES, the international organisation regulating trade in animal parts, rejected adding them to the list of restricted species several times before finally doing so in 2013. The species did at least benefit before this from the bans on shark finning from many nations like the USA, Canada, Australia and the European Union. I spent a lot longer talking about the porbeagle than I expected, but I don't think this is going to get any shorter, as the next species is perhaps the most famous and well-known shark in the world, the great white shark, Carcharodon carcharias. Its name is often shortened to great white, but is also sometimes known as the white pointer or white shark. This name is believed to come from the white underbelly of the shark, as its back is grey. The white would be most visible on beach specimens that are lying on their back. They are found worldwide, only avoiding the cooler waters at either pole. They do favour coastal waters along all of the major land masses, excluding Antarctica, but it is assumed that they can travel the vast oceans, although they are rarely seen there. It is perhaps this fondness for coastal waters, along with their large size, that makes the great white the undisputed holder of the title of most unprovoked fatal shark attacks on humans. Now is probably a good time to address the shark attack aspect of this animal. Yes, they have the most recorded fatal shark attacks, but they are actually not believed to like eating humans, so are not the man-eaters that media has described them as. They do not deliberately target humans. Humans are too bony and have a lower fat and muscle to bone ratio, so great whites would have trouble digesting them. Seals, for example, are much more attractive prey, as they are far richer in fat and proteins. As I mentioned earlier, it is believed that most attacks are test bites in conditions where the shark is unable to tell whether the human is suitable food or not. They tend to bite once, but then back off once they realize it is not their preferred prey. Most of the fatalities occur to blood loss following the attack. There are few confirmed reports of great whites actually eating a human after that first exploratory bite. It has been noted that this could also be because humans are rarely alone, and so are often rescued even if they are already dead or die later. Great whites are large, heavy-bodied sharks, reaching lengths of up to 5.8 meters or just over 19 feet. This size actually means that they are slower swimmers than the other sharks in this family, but they can still reach speeds of up to 25 kilometers per hour or 16 miles per hour for short bursts. They are one of the main predators of marine mammals like seals and dolphins, but they are a generalist predator and so will eat fish, other sharks and birds. There is only one animal known to be able to prey upon great whites, and that is the orca. Great whites are believed to be the longest lived of any cartilaginous fish. Their lifespans are estimated to be 70 years or even longer, which is astonishing for a fish. They are not believed to reach sexual maturity until they are at least 26 years for males or 33 for females, meaning that they are an extremely slow-growing species. Great whites do have an interesting limitation with their gills and muscles. To breathe, fish like sharks need to pass water over their gills, which can then extract oxygen to allow the fish to breathe. There are two techniques sharks can use to do this, and while many species favour one technique over the other, most can switch between them when needed. In buccal pumping, the shark actively uses specialised muscles to pull water over their gills. Ram ventilation, on the other hand, is more passive and means that water flows over the gills as the shark is swimming. Buccal pumping costs more energy, but is more useful for sharks that are moving too slowly for ram ventilation to work. Now, you might be wondering why I am going on a tangent about the way that sharks breathe, but that is because the great white is an exception to what I said earlier. They have lost the ability to use buccal pumping, and so can only breathe with ram ventilation. The downside of this is that they cannot stop swimming forwards. If they ever do, then they will suffocate to death. This is perhaps one reason why attempts to keep great whites captive have always ended badly. Great whites typically refuse to eat in captivity, and many die after a few days. The first record for longest captive great white was set in 1981, where one survived for 16 days before being released. Ones since then have been kept for longer, but all died or had to be released in less than 200 days, with the longest known captive specimen lasting 162 days before being released. It is widely believed that permanent captivity of great whites is impossible, due to the money needed to maintain a large enough enclosure to satisfy the needs of a large migratory shark. Quite aside from the monetary aspect, the stress of capture or confinement is enough to kill most great whites. Great whites are listed as vulnerable globally, but are critically endangered in Europe and the Mediterranean. There are no global population estimates, so it is unknown how much their numbers have decreased, but it is believed that they are decreasing. They are now protected throughout parts of their range in countries such as Australia, New Zealand and the USA. They are further protected as they are listed by CITES to restrict their trade. The last two species of white shark are both in the same genus and are known as the Mako sharks. The first of these is the Shortfin Mako, Isurus oxyrinchus. The word Mako comes from the Maori language and means shark or shark tooth. It also has a variety of other names such as blue pointer or bonito shark. The Shortfin Mako's fins are not especially short, but the name is given to compare it to the Longfin Mako that has unusually long pectoral fins. Short fins typically reach lengths of 4 meters or 13 feet, but very rarely even larger ones can be found. It is highly recognizable due to the metallic blue on its back and the white underside. It is very streamlined, being torpedo-shaped, with a long pointed rostrum and a cylindrical body. It is not easily confused with any other shark, perhaps aside from the Longfin Mako, which is still easily distinguished due to their fins. Shortfin Makos are found worldwide in the temperate and tropical seas, only avoiding the polar waters near the Arctic and Antarctica. Shortfins are very fast, getting up to 75 km per hour or 45 miles per hour. They are no doubt helped with this by their streamlined shape and the homeothermy or ability to maintain a temperature warmer than the surrounding water that we had a look at earlier. They feed on cephalopods, bony fish, dolphins, sea turtles and seabirds. They attack their prey by swimming underneath it and using their blue back to camouflage themselves. They will then swim upwards, tearing chunks out of their target. As well as incredible speed, they also have massive bite force, with a Mako captured off the coast of New Zealand registering the strongest known bite of any shark. Shortfin Makos are incredibly energetic sharks and are sought after by ocean fishermen. When hooked, shortfins will leap out of the water and have also been known to jump directly onto boats. With their high speed and acrobatic antics, they put up a strong fight, so are considered an entertaining challenge by fishermen. Unsurprisingly, for such a fast and acrobatic shark, they fare even worse in captivity than great whites do. The record for longest kept captive is a rather disappointing 5 days. Despite being healthy when captured, the sharks quickly weaken and die. They would find the aquarium confining, which again is not surprising since even the largest aquarium pales in comparison to the open ocean. They would constantly bump against the walls, become stressed, refuse to eat, and quickly die. Makos can attack humans, but it doesn't happen very often. There are only about 10 confirmed attacks and 3 fatalities between 1980 and 2024, as well as about 20 boat attacks. Many of these are considered provoked due to harassment or being caught by a fisherman. Those who have been involved in these attacks describe the sharks swimming in a figure 8 before approaching with their mouth open. Shortfin Makos are listed as endangered by the IUCN. This has been slowly upgraded over time, with it being near threatened in 2000, then vulnerable in 2009, before getting the endangered status in 2019. It is very hard to enact conservation efforts to protect large pelagic fish with near global range, like the Shortfin Mako. It is believed that their population is decreasing in all areas, with the exception of the Pacific Ocean. Overfishing is one of the major factors contributing to this decline. The last member of Lamnidae, and the species most closely related to the Shortfin Mako, is the Longfin Mako, Isurus paucus. The long fins its name references are its pectoral fins, which are even larger than its own head. It is a large shark in general, being the second largest in this family, only behind the great white. It can reach lengths of 4.3 meters or 14 feet, and so is only slightly larger than the Shortfin Mako. Longfin Makos are found in tropical and temperate waters worldwide, but it does prefer the warmer temperature of the tropics. This means it has a smaller range than the Shortfin Mako, since it isn't found quite as far south or north, sticking to waters closer to the equator. Longfin Makos are poorly known compared to the other members of this family. To make matters worse, in fishery reports the Longfin and Shortfin Makos are often confused for each other, so we cannot even be sure how many are being fished up. Longfin Makos have little value to fishermen, so are usually only caught as bycatch in nets. They are a little slower than the Shortfin Makos and don't perform the same acrobatic antics, so they are not really of interest to sport fishermen either. Despite lacking the pressures of overfishing, they are thought to be more uncommon than shortfins and have the same IUCN rating of endangered. Longfin Makos have large eyes and are a visual hunter. They mainly eat small bony fish and cephalopods. However, Longfin Makos have been found with scars from swordfish, but it is unknown if they hunt them like the shortfins sometimes do, or if it was simply an aggressive encounter without the attempted predation. Its other known features are ones common throughout this family, and so we have already discussed them when covering the other species. This includes the reta mirabilia and their form of reproduction. I hope you enjoyed this video. The white sharks are a fascinating group of apex oceanic predators and have many unusual adaptations to give them an advantage over other sharks. Thank you for listening, and feel free to suggest another group of animals you want to see me cover in the comments.